Well, good day, everyone. Chuck Akers here, president of the U.S. Parachute Association. Thank you so much for joining us today. With me on our broadcast today is the world-renowned Canopy pilot, Kaz Shiki, and we're going to get to an intro with Kaz here in just a moment. In the meantime, she'll just wave and look friendly. Before we get started, I love that. That's beautiful. I don't know if I heard that or if the whole world heard that, but at any rate, but before we get started, I want to say thanks to the folks back at headquarters, Shannon Searles, who is our sport promotion manager, helps put this sort of stuff together, along with George Hargis, who will be an integral part of the broadcast today. She'll be taking in your questions as you type them and passing them along to me. She's our PR and social media manager. Also, Ron Bell, he'll be on camera from time to time. Of course, the USPA, there he is, Director of Safety and Training. He does a bang-up job trying to keep us from getting banged up. Jen Sharp, I don't think she's with us on this one. She might be. She's our Director of IT, and she makes a whole lot of this stuff work. If she's not the one doing it, she's dovetailing with somebody else to make it happen. So thank you so much for everybody, and to Albert Burstold, our Executive Director, and his incredible team up there. This is all about land like your life depends on it. It is, of course, a program of the U.S. Parachute Association supporting skydiving and those who enjoy it. Thank you very much. Also, just to let you know, this session is being recorded. So whether you want to call it a podcast or a recording or whatever, bottom line is you'll be able to go back and view this on our YouTube page. That's the USPA YouTube page. Just search for it. It'll pop up. The fatality reports that we will be referencing during today's broadcast are going to be available in the April Parachutist magazine or on April 1st at parachutist.com. You'll hear Kaz referencing some of those incidents, and we just don't have the medium out there for it yet, but it's on the way. Also, by the way, folks who registered, which is, I think, what was it, 72,300, something like that. It was amazing. I'm kidding. Everybody who registered will get an email with a link to the replay of today's broadcast. So we're trying to get our reach out as far as we can. We ask everybody to share the broadcast with others and help spread the word, because you never know what part of a broadcast like this might be the part that saves your life or the life of a friend. So with that said, let me get straight to it here. Today's guest, Kaz Shiki. She's going to wave and look nice for us over there. She has, let's listen to this resume. Kaz grew up in Sydney, Australia, made her first jump of more than 11,000 skydives at Sydney Skydivers in '93. Thanks for the slides. We appreciate that. She has now been skydiving for more than 30 years. So she, I know she looks like she's 22, but she must have started jumping when she was 6. Competitive career dates all the way back. What did you say, 4? Competitive career goes back to the Pro Ranch Swoop Meet. For anybody who reaches far enough back in skydiving, that's kind of the birth of swooping, was the ranch swoop meets. They weren't even really sanctioned in the very beginning. She can expand on that. That was 1998. She's been with Team Fast Track. She also founded Team Slipstream. This is a busy lady. 13 years of competition experience, FLCPA meets, U.S. Nationals, Australian Nationals, Pro Swoop Tours, first World Championships and World Cups of Canopy Piloting. Runner-up, by the way, in the 2005 Pro Swoop Tour. That was a pretty cool event that they put on for a few years there. But she's third at the U.S. Nationals as a guest competitor. Since she's not from the U.S., she took top spot at the Australian Nationals, also served with the Australian Canopy Piloting team at the 5th World Championship. So Kaz has certainly been around. She's been an instructor, as a lot of folks do when they're hardcore world-class competitors. They turn to instruction over the years because that's where they can really let their talents shine. Kaz has been a Canopy instructor for over 20 years, Flight-1 instructor, both civilian and the military side, which I'm sure has its own stories, for more than 14 years now. Also extensive experience. She flies everything from a 67 to a 360. So to say that Kaz has to be well-rounded to do what she does would be an understatement. Served back here on the ground. To finish up the bio, she served in the accounting role for Greenpeace Australia, co-creator of a nonprofit that earned an Emmy Award in the broadcast category. That's kind of cool. She has served as a media manager and web developer, also runs a successful New York-based photography business. That's for about the last 11 years. And I like this part best, family time. This is what she likes, family time, skydiving, obviously, skiing, hiking, biking, paddle boarding, swimming, reading. Oh, and by the way, she is the proud mama of a 10-year-old boy. So she's been raising a kid the whole time she's been doing this other rock star stuff. Welcome, Kaz.
Thank you, Chuck. That was a very nice introduction. I appreciate that. You know, I love skydiving. The sport has given me so much. So I'm really honored to be here. I'm glad to be giving back. And I just want to thank everyone that has showed up tonight and spending time that I know you could choose to do anything else to hopefully get some tips and some tricks to make you a little bit safer along the line, and have a good 2023.
Very good. So before we get started on the meat, let's talk a little bit about what you've been up to and the things that you're involved in. Some of the stuff, pretty groundbreaking stuff, but more importantly, it's just to kind of highlights, if you'll forgive the pun, it highlights some of the things that are going on in your life, both as a competitor, as well as a demonstration jumper and an instructor. So take us through this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chuck. I have been on Highlight Pro Skydiving team since its inception in 2020. And we started the team to celebrate the 19th Amendment, the centennial anniversary, which is women being able to vote. And I love this team. It's like my dream team. I'm a fangirl of everyone on the team, made up of some of the best skydivers in the world. And they're also some of the best people, speakers and everything else. So they really inspire me. And our mission is to inspire women and girls to live bold, brave lives of their own design. So it's pretty cool. And Highlight, we're a values-driven team, and we work with aligned partners and use skydiving as our vehicle to elevate women and to magnify messages of equality and inclusion for all. We've been at it for 4 years now. We jump big flags, tons of smoke lines, jump into stadiums, and we are for hire. So if you know anyone that could align with us, that could use us to come out and do a talk or a demonstration jump, please contact us at highlightskydiving.com. Look us up at Instagram and Facebook. We'd love to have you check out what we're doing. We're all about empowering women and lifting women up to come along with us. So a little bit about Flight-1. I have been instructing with Flight-1 now for 14 years, both on the military and the sports side. And they've actually been around since 2004. They're a great company. I really love that they continually evolve, and we've changed our curriculum recently, and it's truly amazing. It's really easy to understand, and we have something for everyone. We have the 100 series, which I recommend doing as soon as you get off AFF. But I've also had people in it with 8,000 jumps that have got so much out of these 100 series program. Then we have 200 series, and that's where you're learning how to manage the airspeed, then induce airspeed, bring turns into it, and how to do it safely, and the progression and the step-by-step. 300 series, if you want something a little personalized, maybe you and a few friends want to work on something particular, we can make a course for you. Then when you get into competition, from the very beginning to world level, we have instructors all the way along that array of that line. And then also Mutant Harness, which is the harness flying from the hips that you'll see competitors starting to fly now. Then 400 series are quickly flying together relative. It could be air to air, it could be that you're jumping with a team together. How do you fly together up there? And then getting into flocking. We also help sports tandem instructors to fly better. We have a lot of really experienced tandem instructors on our team. And also becoming a Flight-1 instructor, 600 series online instruction and webinars. What I do love about Flight-1 is we get together every 2 years, and we have over 50 instructors now, and we fly together, we learn together, we do seminars, we learn from each other. So when you're doing a course, you're not just getting Kaz up there teaching you, you're getting like 50 instructors of putting all their efforts in and figuring out what's happening on the field and coming in, and I'm really confident. And you're doing one of these courses, you are going to build your confidence, and you are going to get more confident at flying. So thanks for giving me that space. I love Flight-1. I don't get paid for saying that. I really truly do love instructing, and I really like helping people become safer and have more fun under Canopy.
So quick question for you, because some of this stuff's new to me as well. Sport tandem pilot, the 501 course.
Yeah.
Is that actually a course designed to teach to tandem instructors on strategies and flying their parachutes and heavy loadings, light loadings, and all the kind of stuff that they face daily?
Absolutely. And I don't teach it because I'm not, qualified to teach that, but we have some tandem instructors with, over 10,000 tandem jumps, 15,000 tandem jumps. And I think in 2022, we did see a few fatalities on tandems. And we have seen that throughout, like the years. So this is something to really address that, to help learn this new wing that people are, not used to, and get them to fly it safely and efficiently as well.
Good stuff. I'm glad you're tapping into the tandem side of things as well. It's to have those guys and gals as well honed as we can get them is a huge asset.
Yeah, totally right. So, yeah, our next section, we're going to talk about some of the fatality reports, and we're going to go through a view in that. We did have an uptick in fatalities in 2022. And Ron Bell, who is the Director of Safety and Training at the USPA, he has done a really great job in collating, deciphering, sharing methods on how we can learn from these incidences. And he does 8 pages in this current parachutist. And I've read it already. I've read it twice. And I really encourage each of you to go and read it and think about, hey, if you were in that situation, what could you do to make it safer for yourself? And that's the whole reason of putting it together. So I just want to hand it over to Ron Bell for a second, and he can just do a quick introduction on that.
Yeah, it's Ron Bell with USPA Director of Safety and Training. Yeah, check out the fatality summary in the magazine next month. We'll also have the incident summary. The one thing that I wanted to cover, because I only have a couple of minutes, is we only have one category of all of our categories where we're trending up over the last 20 years. Our fatality numbers have been coming down for the last 20 years, but we have one trend line that's going up, and that's intentional low turns. Last year, we had 8 intentional low turns that caused a fatality. And that's huge from years gone past. Unintentional low turns has been an ongoing problem too, and that's covered in the fatality summary. It's also going to be covered. We ended up breaking the incident summary into 2 parts, and the first part is just about landing problems, so focuses on both of those. So I'm super happy that Kaz is here talking about this. Kaz, back to you.
Great, thank you. We'll go next slide. As we mentioned, we're going to talk about unintentional low turn and intentional low turn. I'm going to read this aloud because I know some people are on their phones that they can't see the slides. And then we're going to take a little dive into and see what reasons and how we could prevent this. So a 37-year-old man with 35 civilian sport jumps, 135 military static line round jumps, and 1 year of civilian sport parachute jumping made a solo jump under a 230 square foot canopy loaded at 1.1 to 1. When he was on final approach, he was higher than planned for his intended landing spot, but at approximately 100 feet, he pulled both toggles down and initiated a 3/4 brake turn to the left, even though he had a clear landing area straight ahead. He had completed an almost 360-degree turn when he struck the ground hard. Unfortunately, he died at the scene. Next slide. So I want to go on to some possible reasons what went wrong. And, I want to preface this with, it's not here to pick on this person at all, okay? Because it's very sad that this person has passed, but we really do want to learn from these situations. So hopefully that you don't make the same mistake or your friends don't make the same mistake in the future. So some of the possible reasons here is the jumper prioritized their focus on the target, so they might have got that target fixation instead of thinking about the altitude they were at. The contributing factors are he didn't have that many jump numbers. The experience was low, and I'm not sure how current he was, but only a year as a sports jumper, and I'm not sure if he's done any canopy courses. So thinking about going from round parachutes to square parachutes is very, very different. So there's a whole lot of new learning that has to go on there. And then the landing priorities, we have to remember land with our wing level is number 1. We have to know our landing priorities and follow them. And then if you're doing a turn from 100 feet, and this could be just what someone's eyes may have seen, we don't really know. We know that you need more than 100 feet to do a 360-degree turn. So it's just unsure of the altitude lost in the turns. And then we're going to go to the next slide and talk about what you can think about doing to prevent this from happening to you or anyone. And it's something I'm going to keep coming back to, and it's about building a solid foundation and really building good habits. And that starts from the very beginning of skydiving, like right through AFF, having a good pattern. There's so much to learn in AFF, so we can't concentrate everything on our canopy flight at that time. So as soon as you get off AFF, if you can get yourself on a nice foundation course, it's going to really, really help you learn how to fly a good pattern, which is the next point here. And they're going to take you through how far you need on your final leg, in what wind conditions, and what height you need to turn. They're going to show you that you can put a buffer on your base leg, so if you get there too high or too soon or too late, where to go instead. So really, really knowing how to fly a good pattern is key to not having this happen to you. And when we're thinking about flying a good pattern, we're thinking about our downwind leg is when we make our adjustments. Our base leg is where we make our adjustments. And our base leg is our final leg to make any adjustments to ensure our accuracy. Once we are on our final lane, we should have really, really good lane discipline and fly that straight lane. So give yourself a buffer. So if you do go a little longer, you're not going to hit something, or if you do go a little bit shorter, you're not going to hit something as well. Especially in the learning phases, we need to create a much bigger buffer in this area. Then we can practice some things up high, such as our flat turns and our break turns, and we can practice the altitude that we lose in each of these turns. So we know that 100 feet that I can't do these turns. Then you know that automatically because you've already gone up and practiced that. But we also know that we're not going to do that on final anyway. So you want to, another thing you can do is learn altitudes lost in different turn types. So you could go up there and just do a 90-degree turn, check your digital altimeter, how much altitude did you lose? Turn recoveries. I suggest, do a course and get a coach to help you through figuring out these altitudes. It does make a difference rather than just going up and pulling on things. Talk to people about it. And then that comes to discussing possible scenarios with your AFF coaches at the drop zone, instructors, Canopy instructors, etc. And then I suggest to practice one safe thing under your canopy on every jump. If you have time, if you have the space and the safety to do so, we could just practice something. So we're always getting proficient under our canopy. And then a big thing is always remembering our landing priorities, okay? Get those stuck in your head and really stick to those landing priorities. And our landing priorities are: 1, we're going to land with the wing level. 2, we're going to avoid obstacles and, not hit things. 3, we're going to brake to at least half brakes. And then 4, we're going to land into wind if possible and be prepared to do a PLF if needed. Next slide. The next one is under the category of intentional low turn, meaning this person was practicing high-speed turns. So I'm going to read it out loud. A 36-year-old man with 730 jumps and 4 years of experience was jumping a 103 square foot cross brace parachute loaded at 1.85 to 1 while practicing for an upcoming parachute swoop competition. He initiated a turn for his final approach that was too low and struck the swoop pond at a 45-degree angle while still in a steep diving descent. He initially stood up after the landing, but fell back into the pond and was unresponsive and unfortunately was declared dead at the scene. So we're going to go to the next slide. And we're going to look at what happened here. The turn was initiated too low for him to be able to recover from that turn. The contributing factors to this are target fixation. So he was practicing for a swoop competition. So he's probably looking at gates that he wants to get to, and he's more focused on the gates and probably not as focused on his altitude. And then turning lower than his minimum turn altitude which I'm going to expand a little bit about on the next slide. So what can we do to prevent this? First thing I want to say, you know, I come from a high-speed canopy piloting background and I love it. And although I don't compete in it anymore, I still love to fly my canopy fast. It is cool, it is fun, but it's a progression. And you need to follow the progression in order to be safe. So again, just build that solid foundation and think about getting coaching along the way. As I was just saying, our 200 series, and we have our 300 and our 400, and it's just all those steps along the way, because you could just miss one of those steps and it's just, you know, the thing that is going to injure you or even worse. So work with a coach on this. We spent years figuring this stuff out, and we can help you. Another thing is, and I'm not saying this jumper wasn't ready for this, I'm just saying this is something we can do as we're going into higher speeds. Don't fly something that you are not ready for, and be honest about that. I often see people downsizing way too fast, and you know, in the sport, we don't really see someone going from a 210 to a 71 in 2 years. It's just too short of a period of time. So be honest with yourself. Can you do everything you can possibly do under that canopy before you change sizes or plan forms? And then have that progression plan and stick to it. So it could be just starting off like how to learn how to, you know, build speed. And we were like, there's a whole step by step. I'm not going to spend too much time on it here, but you've got to have that progression plan and stick to it. Use a fly sight you can put on the back of your helmet. You can go up high, you can learn your numbers. You can learn like how much you can lose on a 45-degree turn, a 90-degree turn, brakes, releases, etc. Use the data, have a look at it when you get down, and do it again and again and again up high before you ever bring anything to the ground. And we're only just going to do increments anyway, but definitely work with a coach on this one. And then we're going to have our minimum turn height. So we're going to work out by doing all these things up high, looking at our altimeters, looking at our fly sights. We're going to figure out that we have a, you know, this is the lowest turn we could do of this turn type, and stick to it. Never do a turn lower than that turn. Always be okay with doing a straight in approach. Take your time. Part of the journey is sometimes the most fun getting there. It's not always the destination. Enjoy that journey. We want to be here for a long time. Skydiving is amazing. Enjoy it, but just take your time. And then always remember your landing priorities. So that's it, what I've got for the fatalities. If Ron or Chuck, if you wanted to add anything to this, or
I'll chime in and then I'll hand it to Ron, because my stuff is not really technical, but and Ron can attest to this. The data that we've got suggests, well, it indicates that we have 3 factors that seem to stand out in our intentional low turn category, and that's males less than 1,000 jumps with a rapid downsizing progression. And I guess the difference that I see between someone like yourself or the guys and gals on the PD Factory team or Alter Ego or these really high level canopy pilots is that they understand that there's a science behind it. And all of them, including Flight-1, which you work for, all of them offer the ability to take someone from left turn, right turn flare, which quite honestly is about all we know when we get our A license, right? I mean, that's all we really know the parachute will do. It'll fly straight ahead, turn one way or the other, and stop. And those are the 4 things it can do. And so what we learn because the average jumper today jumps a higher wing loading than they did, say, 20, 30 years ago, and a wing design that is way more powerful, a lot more performance built into the design. It's becoming increasingly important to understand why those wings do what they do. And that's exactly what these types of courses teach. So the only thing I would say is, for anybody who thinks they don't need this type of training, you're right, you don't need this type of training. And there's a lot of people who have been injured or killed who also thought they didn't need this type of training. So with that, I'll hand it back to you guys, Ron.
Yeah, I have to agree 100%. Unintentional low turns has been significant over the last 20 years. And like I said, the trend line slowly growing up. The statistics that Chuck stated, under 1,000 jumps, males typically have a history of aggressive downsizing, is huge in that category. Something that I noticed last year, 4 out of the 8 last year were very experienced pilots that were extremely good at what they did. They just didn't seem to have the wherewithal to bail out of a turn that was inappropriate when they weren't meeting their landing priorities that they needed to. So that's, even when you do become really good at this, it's still extremely dangerous, and you need to adhere to those altitudes that you know that you can safely turn at, and have the wherewithal to bail out of a turn when the conditions demand it, and that's huge.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with all of that. Yeah, so I'm going to move on to, we have a lot to pack in here, to an unusual situation. And this is actually an incident that happened to me last year. So I thought I would share it. And it is unusual because you don't see it that often. But the more that I've looked into it, I have found that it has happened to quite a few of my friends in the past, but it just hasn't, talked about it. So last year in free fall, I dislocated my shoulder on a belly jump, which is kind of shocking. You would think I would dislocate at landing or something, but it was actually in a free fall jump, and it wasn't anything crazy. I had to make a quick assessment. I had to think quick, and I had to adjust my landing technique. So I'm going to tell you the story quickly, but also give you some tips on what you can do to practice in case this would happen to you. So a little bit about what happened. I was doing a three-way belly jump from 10,000 feet. It was at the end of the day. I was working Canopy with these people. They have low jump numbers for free fall, a little bit more in Canopy. I had my VK71 that I was wearing. Anyway, we had planned to exit on our bellies unlinked. So free flying the exit. Then we're going to link into a star, let go, individual 360s, back to a star. If we had time, do it again. And at 6,500 feet, track away, 5,500, wave off, 5,000, pull. So anyway, I get together, take my first dock, and all of a sudden the fall rate just changed dramatically, what we call like a potato chip. So it went from really fast, because I was arching very hard, until it was really slow. And it was, I was trying to muscle, it to keep the formation together, but it was just too much for my arm, and it just popped out. I didn't really know that it had popped out at the time. I just know that it really hurt. And I was kind of assessing what was going on. My eyes were watering. So we let go. I do the 360. It was the worst 360 that I can remember doing. Anyway, I come in, I go to take the dock, and then my hand just wouldn't go up to that person's arm. And I was like, okay, something's going wrong here. I decide to wave off. I'm plenty high. I'm like 8,000 feet. And I need to say that the day before, I jumped with these two people at the end of the day, and I tracked off at 7,500 feet because I had a helmet on that had the wrong height on the ditter, and I promised them this jump I wouldn't track away high. So they're looking at me really weirdly, and they're like, oh, she's going again, So I wave off, and I turn around, and I started to even turn in my track. So I had to use my right leg to compensate, and to notice like, oh, my arm's not working. So I was deciding when I was tracking, it's amazing when you have an emergency situation, how much your brain can slow down and take everything in. It's so amazing. I love that. So there was a million things going through my mind. I'm like, okay, so I have a larger reserve. I had 126 in my rig, and then I have a 71. So I'm like, oh, what would I rather fly? Would I rather fly the big parachute or the small parachute if my arm's not working? I decided that I wanted to fly the reserve if that was the case, but I get far enough away and I'm going to assess. So I'm going to do a practice touch. So I reach back and it's like, oh, my hand doesn't even go there. So I don't really even have to make that decision as it is. And I thought, oh, I've got plenty of time. I'll try again. I was like, oh, I'm starting to go head down. I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be using my reserve. So I waited. If any of you have had a terminal reserve opening, it's really hard. So I knew what was going to happen. It was going to be hard. So I tried to get as big as I can, went for my reserve, waited to 4,000 feet. And then as soon as I pulled my reserve, I tried to relax into it, but I felt everything crack. I felt my neck and my back and my arm crack, but I felt some kind of relief in my arm at the same time. So it, as weird and lucky as it was, I had dislocated it, but it did go back in during that hard opening. Crazy, right? So
Wow.
I mean, the doctor, they weren't believing me at first until they looked at the MRI and they're like, yes, you definitely had a dislocation. It definitely came out and went back in. So anyway, I just use my harness to steer, which is something that you can do, right? Or you might have the other hand to use your risers. And I need to assess what was going on. I was in a good position. I had a good spot. So I felt like I had a little bit of movement with my hand. So I reached with my my left hand under my right elbow, and I pushed it up to my toggle, and I was able to grab it and then pull it down to match my other toggle. So I wasn't turning, grab my other toggle, and I could get it down to about here. And that's all I could do. So I practiced that flare probably 5 or 10 times as I'm setting up. And then I was ready to use one hand to flare. So for me coming in, and this is not a suggestion that you would do, you would probably put in one hand and flare with it. But for me, I came in and I flared with one hand, I transferred and I finished the flare and slid it in. And I'll say the reason I did that is because I had a lot of things going for me on this jump, besides dislocating my shoulder. That's not what I had going for me. I had that I was at a really good height. I had awareness during my track. Everything slowed down. I have 2 altimeters, so even if it happened to the other hand, I would still know what altitude I am. Plus, I have an audible. I've flown my reserve 11 times before, so I know how to flare it. I know, how to fly it. So, that being said, reserves are available for you to try and fly. So sometimes that is a good thing to do. If you go to a boogie and you see that there's a reserve there from PD, you can go and fly it, hook it up as a main and practice the flare. So it's not a surprise when it happens the first time, and I highly recommend that. So I knew how to fly that. And then a good thing, my arm went back into place on opening. But the biggest thing that I had going for me is I have done this hundreds of times, as in put my toggles into one hand. I am a demo jumper, so we're putting it into one hand. I'm popping the smoke. And at first, when you do this, it's really weird because if you pull it to the left, you're going to turn right. If you pull it to the right, you're going to turn left. So it takes a while to get used to it. But then try flaring with it, and it's quite difficult. Out here is harder because you're using this part of your arm, but if you bring it in, maybe turn it in and use your bicep a little more, it can be a little bit easier. Also in swoop competitions, what we call a switchblade is going from one hand, both hands to grab. And this is while you're already in contact with the water and then doing things with your hand, waving, whatever. That's called a switchblade. That was one of my signature moves. I've done it hundreds of times. So luckily for me, I've had the practice. But what I want to ask you is, what decision would you make, right? Now, if I had my Spectre or a Sabre or bigger canopy and it happened to my left arm instead of my right, I think I would have preferred to fly those canopies. They're a little bigger, okay? Because I had my 71, I decided that I would have liked to use my reserve, and I would have done that just exactly the same if I had hurt the other arm as well. And then what about, can you reach across with your other arm if you have to? Have you thought about that? Say if you have to use your reserve. Okay, something good to maybe practice if you're doing a solo one time, just to see what it feels like, and then go up there and put those toggles into one hand, see if you can flare with it. Go up there, put them into this hand, see if you can flare with it. You never know, it could just save you one day. So that's it.
Especially given that the dislocated shoulder thing is not all that rare in skydiving. I've known numerous people over the years. I mean, it's usually from something specific. It doesn't just usually just come out for no reason, but just like in your case, it was essentially pulled out of socket. But you said that when the reserve deployed, it actually went back into socket. Who packed that reserve?
So it was a great, it was packed the night before from Pablito.
Who?
Pablito in DeLand. I can't think of his last name. I love Pablito. Sorry, I can't think of your last name. He is amazing, and he packed it It was on heading, it was beautiful, but it's hard. It's a reserve opening.
Well, so he gets another tip for putting your arm back in socket.
Yes,
He gets a
yes.
tip for the good reserve opening and a second tip for fixing your
I
front.
know,
Kind
I
of like
know.
that.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy thing that happened, and I didn't expect it. But yeah, that's something I try and teach my students too, to even before this happened, is go up and see what it's like to fly with one hand and see if you can steer it okay, and see if you could flare if need be. Awesome. So we could go next. A little bit about what we're going to hit up next. We're a little bit about getting back into the season. We're going to talk about some currency exercises, dealing with traffic in the pattern, choosing an out, when, and where. With the currency exercises, I'm just going to briefly go over it. Last year, I did a event with the USPA again, and that's on the YouTube channel. And I go a lot more deeply into the currency exercises. So I recommend that you go and listen to that. But we can go to that next size. Good. So some of the things you can do just on the ground is most drop zones have a hanging harness available. So go and jump into that hanging harness. You could practice thinking about different malfunctions that you may have. Think about how you would react to those. Get used to your cutaway procedures. Get used to practicing those. And then practice flares. You could even practice brake turns. You could even do a mock pattern up there in this, just to make you feel a little bit more practice before you get in the air. Also, you can put your own rig on and practice touching your emergency handles and your pilot chute. And then maybe a canopy course or a refresher, or work with a coach even for free fall skills. And then for in air, some of the things you could do are, one, I suggest if you haven't started jumping yet for the season, just take it slow. You don't have to go up and be on a 5-way or a 10-way. Take a few jumps where perhaps you're just doing a solo, so you can get reacclimated and not put too much on your plate. And then when you're up there, maybe a hop and pop if your drop zone allows it. Maybe you could open a little higher if you if they allow that, and you put yourself in the right position in the plane. Make sure everyone is aware if you are going to open higher. And some of the things you could practice are your sweet spot, your flare drills, some brake turns. If you've already done a course and you know about riser work, you could practice some riser work. And then, it's always great to jump with a coach and get a refresher with them, because there's some things that you might not remember. But hopefully you've all gone to safety days. If you haven't, if there's one coming up, and if not, just try and learn as much as you can and have a great season. Yeah. So the next thing brings us into dealing with traffic. We're not coming in all by ourselves, right? So we have an array of different canopy types that are coming in together. We have big ones, large ones, we'll have tandems, etc. And we're all merging to this one area where we want to land. So sometimes that can be a little unnerving, but we can do a lot of preparation to prepare for this and make sure that we are safe and consistent before we get into our pattern and while we're on our pattern. So that brings us to the first point: get in the right position before you enter the pattern. So that means, say if you start your pattern at 1,000 feet, okay? And you're at 2,000 feet. I don't want you on the top just spiraling. Where you want to be is thinking about, hey, am I a bigger parachute? Am I going to allow the smaller parachutes just to, sink below me a little bit, and I'm just going to stay up there? Maybe even a tiny bit of brakes. If you see some smaller parachutes there, you could just let them go past. If you're a smaller parachute and you're up here and you see a big parachute, the last thing you want to see is that big parachute doing spirals, because you know that when you get on the pattern, you're going to pass them. So you want to hopefully pass them before you get to that pattern. So when you're on the pattern, you're all nicely in the right order. So don't rush to get to your pattern. Take everything slow and be very smooth as you enter. If you do have to pass before you get to the pattern, do so safely. And this is where we just suggest being predictable and not flying with like crazy amount of turns before you get into your pattern, because this really is where you know, where you're on the lanes of the highway coming in. You don't want someone doing 360s as you're trying to merge. Once we're in the pattern and before we're in the pattern, we're going to fly predictably, small inputs. If you can remain in the same order in the pattern, do so. If you have to pass, make sure your leg kick and do a lot of room to spare. And then think about your pattern here is you can still make adjustments on your downwind and your base leg. It doesn't mean don't do anything, still fly smoothly, but try and stay in your lane as much as possible. And then when you get on your final, this is when we have to have really, really good lane discipline. So sometimes we have at our drop zone, we'll have arrows or T's, or traffic is going one direction or the other. Some drop zones will only allow you to fly 2 different directions because it's too narrow. So make sure you know the drop zone rules and stay in that lane, because this is where people are hurting themselves when they're in that lower range to the ground. We definitely don't want to have any collisions. And, you know, there were a few incidences last year. I'm not going to expand on that now, but it was because people were cutting across and cutting into other people's lanes, and that can be extremely dangerous. Keep awareness of those around you. So we are looking at the target, but we can also see in our peripheral vision where other people are in case we have to move away if they don't see us. And then beware of target fixation. This could mean 2 different things. Say if I'm coming in and I see the flagpole, if I look at the flagpole and I thought, oh, I don't want to hit the flagpole, I don't want to hit the flagpole, you know, you're probably going to hit it if you keep looking at it. So just look away, and that could be enough to veer you a couple of degrees, you know, change that heading a little bit so you're not hitting that obstacle. But also target fixation too is you may want to land in the P pit because you're working on your accuracy, but say if there's already like 8 or 9 people in there and it's just going to cause too much traffic for you to go there. It's like, oh, maybe you can land just to the side of it this time and make room and do it on the next one. It's going to be a lot safer. And I'll give you an example of something that happened to me many years ago at the ranch. I was filming a tandem. I'm in the P pit, and I probably should have been more aware, but I was focused on my student. And then I hear, Kaz, watch out. And I look up, and then all of a sudden this tandem like picks me up off my feet and throws me 10 feet into the P pit. They broke their tooth on my nose that was broken, and it's just because we're crowding into that one place. So don't always think that you have to be all in that same place. If you do land in the P pit, no other people are going to be landing there too. Look around, make sure that you're aware in case someone is coming in so you don't get hit. Thinking about your skydive is not over until you are out of the landing area and you are back safely. So if you're walking back, having a great time with your friends, just keep an eye out to make sure that you're not causing traffic and you're not going to get hit. And then the big one is remembering our landing priorities. And we can go next. So these 2 slides are just some visual representation of what can happen on final. So we can set up our downwind and our base leg fairly well sometimes, but sometimes we may be a little early or, you know, not in the exact spot where we want to turn on our final. So if you can, still stick to your altitude. So say 300 is your turn altitude for your final, stick to it and just take that landing over to the side. And then on the next jump, we can adjust it. So instead of merging, think about lane discipline, lane discipline, lane discipline. We all have to fly in the same direction as the rest of the traffic. Next slide. And you might find yourself, say if you get there high on final at 400 feet, you can do 1 or 2 things. You can just land long, or you can take a little bit further till you get to that 300 feet. So you're landing just to the side of your target. But one thing again, lane discipline, no turns, no big turns, you know, especially on final, because it's going to be dangerous to everyone else around. If you're setting up your pattern, as I said earlier in the evening, give yourself a buffer. So you should have room, like say if I can't quite make it all the way on my base leg, you should still be able to turn and be safe. Or if you go a little further, you should still be able to turn and be safe. Or that's extra room in front of the target for you to land long and extra room before the target for you to land short. So give yourself those buffers.
And you know, as Kaz was pointing out, something that a lot of people don't think about is if you jump at a small, let's face it, a lot of our drop zones, not every place in the United States is a mega center with big turbines and all that. That a lot of our drop zones are still small 182 operations. Everybody jumps with the same folks, day, week in, week out. And so they get to know one another. So it's easy to relax when you can see the other, in the case of a 182, you can see the other three canopies in the sky. So if they're going to be in any kind of conflict as you get into that tighter and tighter realm of everybody coming basically to the sweet spot of the landing area, whatever that is at your drop zone. So if you come from a small drop zone, you can lose the importance of things like lane discipline and things like that, because you don't typically have to deal with it in a real world way on every skydive the way you do if you're jumping the bigger turbine aircraft. So for folks that are at the smaller drop zones, I do know that there have been accidents in the past where somebody from a small drop zone went to a big drop zone and the traffic was either an intimidation factor or caused them to make some bad decisions. So my advice is, even if you jump in a small drop zone, get used to this concept of lane discipline and flying good solid patterns, because even if you don't typically need it at that small drop zone, you're going to need it sooner or later, and you don't want it to take you by surprise.
Perfect. Thank you, Chuck. It's so true. The next section and final section here is choosing an out, when and where. So really, unless you're only doing hop and pops and you can control the spot at all times, it's usually not a matter of if you're going to land out, it's just a matter of when you're going to land out. Some drop zones, it's really not a big deal at all because they might have massive fields, but others may have surrounding trees and water and neighborhoods, etc., which take a lot more thought because you could be in real danger if you land in some of these hazards. So some of the reasons we may land out, it could just be the type of jump. Maybe we're on a tracking jump, a moving jump, big ways, say there's multiple planes getting big ways out, wingsuit jumps, that we could just have a bad spot, the spot not being right. It could be because it's first load of the day and we go by forecasted winds, but maybe they're not correct. You could be first out, last out. Maybe your pilot is trying to find a hole through the cloud somewhere and you don't end up in a good spot. And it could be just not good spotting. And sometimes if there's a storm, getting close is when I'd be like a little weary about even jumping, because as a big storm comes in close, the winds are going to change dramatically. And you can go from having 0 winds to, 30-mile-an-hour winds. And I've seen it where, one time at Sky's the Limit about 8 years ago, we weren't jumping. It was 15-mile-an-hour winds. We were in the hangar teaching, and then all of a sudden I hear this whack on the hangar, and it wasn't someone hitting the hangar, it was the wind hitting the hangar. And we went outside and we looked, in these they were doing 15 ways, and we looked up, and then all of a sudden these canopies were just like flying backwards, and there was people landing in trees, and it was mayhem. Some people handled it really well, but something like that could happen. You don't even know it's happening, right? So I haven't seen that too often, but I have seen it with storms occasionally. So just be wary that you're not trying to beat a storm all the time. Just be sensible. And then you could have a low opening situation where maybe you lose awareness. Hopefully you don't. We have audibles to help us out, but maybe you're in a big way and you're tracking and you have traffic, so you have to take a little lower, or possibly you're having a malfunction or something's happening with your gear, or you're on a reserve ride. You could put yourself a little lower. So we're going to land out every now and then. It's going to happen to us, right? But pre-planning, next slide, please. What we can do is there's a lot we can do to pre-plan before we find ourselves, oh my gosh, we're just going to land out. So we're going to say the best surprise is no surprise. There's always going to be a little bit of a surprise when you land out, right? It feels like demos. There's always something that surprises you. But some of the things that you can do to pre-plan, this is now on the ground. You can ask yourself, are you proficient at maximizing your glide? Do you know how to maximize your glide when you're into the wind? How about when you have the wind pushing you? What about when you have a crosswind with a little downwind component, or a headwind with a little, a little headwind with crosswind components? Like, can you safely, be as efficient as you can to get your canopy where it needs to go? And then, are you aware of the accuracy trick? Have you tried it? Is it something that is easy for you or hard for you? In the courses, we teach that. We put a whole jump just on figuring out accuracy trick and on being proficient on your glide. And that is where you're looking at a target. And if the target's moving down in your field of vision, it looks like, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to make it past that area. Or if it's moving up in your field of vision, you're like, well, maybe I'm not going to quite make it. But if you do change your glide, you may be able to change that mode to make it back. So learning the accuracy trick is something you can help plan for, to not land out maybe, but to even know if you are going to land out. A big one is are you familiar with the outs at your drop zone and a drop zone that you may travel to? And how about the hazards at that out as well? Sometimes hazards have changed too, right? So if you think about your drop zone and you think about, like, you know, all the different directions, can you visualize where is your biggest area and what would you prefer to go to? And what are the hazards in each? Are there roads? Are there power lines? Are there wires? How about fences? Sometimes those wires and fences, they're hard to see from above. So it's good to know on the ground before you go up. Maybe there's a bull. Maybe you want to know where the gate is. There could be crops. What about the time of the season? Are they corn? Like September, they're going to be super high. Maybe early in the season, they're going to be low. What about soybeans? They're going to be a little lower. Trees, how high? What about the grade? Is there a steep grade? Is there a slow grade? There's so much to think about, right? There's like big rocks. And then one good thing is Google Earth. I love it. It has a ruler there. So you can open up Google Earth. You can go explore around at your outs. You can get the ruler and you can measure the distances and see, like, oh, this is about the same as the drop zone. I'd love to land here if I have to land out. But also have a look at the date that it was taken, because it could be 3 years ago and they could put a housing estate up since then. So make sure it's current. But this is all something you can do, is prepare yourself by going and having a look at your outs and seeing where they are at your drop zone. Something we do with Highlight with our demonstrations is we're jumping into a place that we haven't jumped into before. We're going to walk it, but we're also going to look at our outs and we're going to say, this is the preferred out, the second preferred out, the third preferred out, and we're going to color code those maps. So that's a suggestion that you could do at your drop zone. If you have a map and you put color codes on those outs, if you don't already have it up there, it's something that would be very helpful for the jumpers. And then reminder of your hazard procedures. So if you find yourself landing in water, do you remember the procedures from your B license? What about if you land on a road or a runway or taxiway? You may want to get off with the way that the wind is pulling you, so you're not, like, you know, wrestling with your parachute. And then maybe you have a farmer McNasty that you have to be very careful about opening their gate, knocking on their door. What about power lines? We want to make sure the power's turned off before someone tries to get us down. What about if we land in a tree? We want to make sure we try and secure ourselves and hold on as much as possible. We're not going to cut away from that tree until someone can come and help us. There have been some injuries from people trying to get out of the tree themselves, so be very, very careful with that. So just re-familiarize yourself with those situations of hazards and how you're going to deal with them. Another thing is wind indicators. What wind indicators could be at those hazards? Maybe you're lucky and you have a big flag up there, but most of the times we don't. We might have crops, we may have water, we may just have grass or the ground track. Maybe you can see how fast you are flying. That could help determine what way the wind's coming. And so all these sort of things that you can think about before you go and jump on how to read different wind indicators is going to help you out if it does happen to you. And then we also look at the winds before each jump, so then we have a little bit of knowledge of what's going on. And then the long spot is, hey, okay, we've done all the preparation, but it's really happening to us. I open, I'm really far away. I've got to decide, like, do I have enough altitude to safely turn around with the traffic if I get back? Okay, so I don't want to just come in downwind and oppose everyone and make it unsafe. And that could be your accuracy trick, figuring out how to get back. So what altitude do you need to make this decision by? I'll give you an altitude, but it's really all dependent on your circumstances. So if I'm going towards a drop zone that may have like one tiny little obstacle between me, like a tree or something, maybe I would leave it to my pattern altitude, 1,000 feet, to make that decision if I know I can land just before it. But if I'm in a situation where I have a ton of trees and a river between where I am and the drop zone, I'm going to make that decision a lot higher. And so that thinks about, so you want to be thinking while you're assessing whether you're going to make it back is where do I want to go? I've already planned it out. That spot may be behind you. Don't get so focused on what is between you and the drop zone of trying to make it back. It's like, oh, this is not a time to live with hope and prayer. It's a time to use our knowledge and our skill to decide on getting us back.
So that's a perfect place to jump in, Kaz. We've got some questions, and by the way, it's also a perfect place for me to say if you've got questions either about anything that we have already covered or anything that we will cover between now and when the Q&A starts, which is coming up next. Just type it into the. I don't have the same visual that the folks watching do, but as I understand it, there's a little chat box you can type your question in or your comments. And so with that, anybody that has questions or comments, and George is working behind the scenes to feed those questions to me. With that said, we're going to begin with question number one. I don't want to take you off of your flow. This just happens to be a perfect question for where you are on the flow right now. Gary wants you to discuss, if you could, briefly the technique for best glide performance with versus against the wind. I know that that's probably night and day, but in a nutshell, what would you tell him to be? What's the strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I am going to be flowing with the wind behind me, I could use a braked mode, could help me, it's going to keep me up and it's going to let the wind carry me along. So I could use like a half brake or a 3/4 brake mode. What's easy about that too is that I'm not hanging on my risers and using all of my energy on my risers the whole time. I could be sitting in nice and comfortable, and I could just put my hands into my harness here and just sit nice and comfortably and get small with my body. But that being said, it's something you want to go and explore with your particular canopy as well, with the wind behind your back, and see what feels right for you as well. And then if I have a little bit of a headwind, I'm going to go to a little bit of my rear risers, but it's a very, very slight movement. I can't put this arm up yet for glide adjustment. So it's just a very, very slight movement. What we do find, I do a lot of air to airs with military people, and they often pull them down way too much. So sometimes brakes, if I do have a downwind, brakes can be easier because if I'm not being efficient with my risers. But we do
the slight rear as opposed to the hard rear, but the slight rear does what? Flatten the glide to extend it?
Yeah, it's just going to flatten it a little bit and extend it. And this is an interwind. But if I have like a really strong interwind, that will not help me. So okay. I'm talking about like a medium interwind with a very, very small body position. And I'm just going to ever so slightly pull down on those rear risers.
So, this one's going to be answered sooner rather than later. So let's just go ahead and do it now. Derek wants to know, and this is probably a little more conceptual. What do you recommend when looking for a canopy coach? The fundamentals, if you had to tell somebody in 3 easy steps, here's how you find one. What would it be?
Go to Flight-1. Look me up. No.
There's one.
Well, we have 50 instructors worldwide. Definitely use someone that has a really good reputation in the sport, that that they've proven themselves time and time again, and then they have good reviews and good curriculum as well.
Very good. Continuing on with a couple of Q&As before we get back to the flow here. Bernie wants to know, what are the beginner drills for pulling on the fronts for the first time? I know this is an area where you go from never having done it to now people want you to utilize it. Can you take him across that bridge?
Yeah, well, so first of all, if you're going to be pulling on your fronts, make sure you are high and you have the right altitude and you don't have any traffic. So all of the exercises are going to be done high. We're not going to do anything down low. a lot of the front risers, you're going to have loops on there. So we're always going to maintain our toggles in our hands when we're reaching for our loops. We're not going to let the toggles go. And then you can look up, reach through those front riser loops. And I just twist my hand a little bit and then pull them in closer to your body here. Because if you pull them down like this, it's like the weakest part of my body. So it's really, really hard to pull them down. So you want to about twist, use your biceps, and then pull them in close towards your body.
Okay, picking up where we left off, for you guys that are in queue for questions, we'll get right back to you. Let's give Kaz a chance to catch back up with her flow.
Okay, excellent. So I can't remember where I was here. I think, oh yeah, so we picked a place that may be a place behind us or beside us, and then have a look at your wind indicators, check what your new pattern is going to be, so you can be thinking about all of this. Remember your landing priorities, land with your wing level. Perhaps you're not landing into wind because you might want to pick the longest section of it. It could be a little bit crosswind, so be okay with that. And then be ready for a PLF if needed. And then you want to ask yourself, when you do land out, are you in any immediate danger? If there's a bull, make sure you get out of there, etc., a tree or whatever. And then call the drop zone, have the drop zone's number in your phone to let them know you're okay and have someone come pick you up. And this is just a quick summary for you guys to go and do some homework after this. And you can ask yourself or get better at it. How efficient is your glide? Can you maximize your glide in all wind conditions? Do you know the wind indicators off the drop zone? Can you read crops, water, smoke flags? Hopefully smoke you can. Can you look at your outs in all directions again? Refamiliarize yourself with those. Have they changed? Practice your accuracy trick. Practice your accuracy on each jump. So perhaps you go to the P's all the time, but maybe you might want to grab something bright and move it somewhere else in the drop zone, and then practice accuracy on that. And move it somewhere else on the drop zone, practice accuracy on that. You can practice accuracy on every single jump. And then perhaps you can do a long spot, you know, if it's with someone and they're helping you out. If you're new, make sure you do it under supervision, just to get used to like working out your glide ratio and your efficiency under your glide. Remembering your landing priorities, can you all recite them? Remembering your procedures for landing on different hazards, can you reread them, go over them? Do you have your phone on you? Do you have the phone number of the drop zone in it? Perhaps you can take another Canopy course or refresher course. And then if like Flight-1 on their website has a lot of courses already up, if they don't have one at your drop zone, you can request one. I just want to say, I know I sound like I'm plugging Canopy courses, and I don't get any money when you go to anyone else's Canopy courses whatsoever. But I truly, truly believe that doing course is going to help you become a safer pilot, and it is a really great investment to continue investing in, because we all love each other, right? We want everyone to be safe. So I just want to say, before I hand over to questions, thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you, Chuck and Ron. And I hope you're able to get some value out of tonight's presentation. I truly love our sport so much, and I love teaching and knowing that I'm helping make the sport safer too. So questions?
Wow, good for you. Thank you so much for all that. There's 45 minutes of solid content, folks. Not too many people can bring that to you, but Kaz absolutely can. Okay, so picking up where we left off, this is kind of an interesting question. Adam wants to know, when is the best time to start focusing on a Canopy specific discipline? And I assume he means maybe crew versus CP, I guess. Maybe the folks behind the curtain can let me know, but based on the way the question was worded, what would you say to that?
You know, I would say work on your accuracy on every single jump. As soon as you feel like your accuracy is great on all of, on every jump, and do a few Canopy courses, a coach is going to be able to help you where you're at. So I can't give you a specific jump number, because I have seen people come through with 150 jumps and be complete rock stars. And I've seen people with 500 jumps that are like not quite as efficient as the person with 150 jumps. So it all depends where you're at, but I think you could dabble a little bit. There's a lot of CRW camps out there. They might have minimum jump numbers. I'm not sure what they are, but definitely a coach can help you out with when you're ready for it, for sure.
Very good. And also George, one of our behind the scenes rock stars back there, just did she did clarify. He was talking about CF versus CP, that sort of thing. And perfect answer though. You know, it kind of depends on where he is or she is, as the case may be, in their progression. Ron, did you want to chime in here? Whoop. Ron had his camera on for a second. I thought maybe he wanted in. So yeah, obviously, you know, it depends on your individual skills, but to hear it from Kaz makes all the difference. But I will say it's never too early to start exploring, especially if you're talking about things like canopy formation skydiving, where not too many people really know about it. So you can actually just go learn, even if you're not ready to do it yourself. There's great places. I know the guys down at Z Hills love it when people show up to land, all those places. There's lots of places where crew is pretty much an everyday occurrence. And if you want to learn more about it, I'm sure that they take you under their wing. I know they did when I was a young guy and wanted that kind of direction. Let's see, there we got that one out of the way. That one out of the way. Preston wants to know, other than winds aloft forecast, how can you determine the winds after opening to determine if you're going to be able to make it back? We covered some of that. Is that more of just the figuring out which way the winds are going, and then of course using the non-moving point trick?
Yeah, yeah, that is. It's really like knowing your accuracy trick and seeing if that you can manipulate that spot to start moving down in your field of vision, or if it is moving up in your field of vision. One thing to note is it's, you know, not always the case, but usually as you get a little bit lower, usually the winds start to die down a little bit. So you sometimes may have the stronger winds at 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, but it's not set in stone because sometimes we have different layers that are stronger. But they tend to go a little bit lower as you get towards the ground. So definitely look at your forecast winds, and you can look at the ground track that you're making across the ground. You can usually tell if you're going fast or you're going slow.
Very good. I like this question because it digs down just a little bit psyche-wise. John says Kaz has 11 reserve rides, so she feels comfortable, in quotations, flying it, which was what you said earlier. What is this message for newer jumpers? What would your message be to newer jumpers? You've done it 11 times. You obviously feel like an old hand at it by now, but what about the new guy that's never ridden it, or maybe he's only had one?
You know, we have a reserve. They do fly very nicely now. They're, you know, they're great canopies. They do flare very well, as you know, as well. I've been able to stand my reserve landings up, except for this one, I had to slide it in. And as I said, just if you can get a chance to go fly it, if you're at a boogie somewhere and it is there for you to try it out, I recommend doing that. Don't be scared of it though. The reserve there is packed by a really good licensed rigger, and we have to have them packed, you know, close to each other so that if something goes wrong with where it's stored, hopefully that situation is found out. So you should be able to trust in your reserve for sure.
So unlike the higher performance canopy pilots, where the main canopy is almost always smaller than the reserve, the average sport jumper, I know they tend to either match fairly closely, or in many cases, the main's larger than the reserve. For a younger jumper, if they jump, say, a 170, and all of a sudden they get the realization that the reserve is maybe a 135 or something like that, it can be unnerving to them. But I always remind those folks that the reserve canopies are really built with very specific goals, and that is, number one, open cleanly in all kinds of conditions, because you're never quite sure if someone's going to be stable or on their head or fast or slow or whatever. And to fly straight ahead whenever possible if you have line twist, because it's a lower aspect ratio, kind of designed to be stable. And then last but not least, they're designed to have a powerful flare, so that even though it's a smaller canopy, 7-cell, F111 or whatever it's made of, which are all negatives in the performance categories, the fact is they're designed to have a good powerful flare. I've got 11 rides on reserves. They're all pretty small, and they were all stand-ups, because at the end of the day, you can bury those toggles and really get a good solid flare out of almost every reserve on the market today. So don't be intimidated. My advice would be, don't be intimidated by the reserve. Just go through your procedures, control checks, practice flares. If you find yourself under your reserve, just don't make the first time you practice landing it the first time you land it. So do some exercises and get used to it. But don't be, like Kaz said, don't be afraid of it.
Yep. That's it. Just do a practice, you know, hopefully you'll have time to do some practice flares before you bring it into land if you find yourself under that wing. If you are looking at purchasing, I suggest to get the biggest reserve that is recommended for the rig that you have, because I want the biggest reserve that I can get rather than have a smaller one than my main.
Next up, how long does it take to use the Igor wants to know, how long does it take to use the accuracy trick from the time you look at the target to determining if you will be long or short? Imagine that can have to do with whether you're up or downwind, how quickly your sight picture changes, but take that question as it stands.
The accuracy trick can be tricky, right? Some people can find it straight away, and then other people take a long time to find it or can't see it at all. So it really does depend on the person. What I suggest, if you're not seeing it straight away, you can always look a little closer down, so a little steeper, and have a look at that and see if you now can start to see that moving down in your field of vision. Something that you're going to pass for sure. Bring it a little closer. It's like, oh, okay, that's moving down. Then you can incrementally put it to the next step. Oh, that's still moving down. Oh, find that spot that's not moving, and that's generally the spot that your canopy is going to go to. But it does take time. It does take practice. So I really suggest just to go out and try it. Even if you're looking further away from your drop zone, just to get practice on jumps, to really get those visuals. And you can look at it too on your final. So once you've turned on to final, maybe the target that you're going for, you can look at that and see if it's moving up in your field of vision or down in your field of vision, and that's going to help your accuracy as well. Resisting
the temptation to make last minute modifications to your flight.
Yes.
We've all seen that one. Oh, there's the target. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Let's see. Thank you, Igor, for that. Peter, this is a little different, not technical, more professional side of the house. Peter wants to know, is there a Canopy course for instructors? He says, I don't want to be a Flight-1 instructor, but I would like to get some new tips and tricks to up my game. Is auditing Flight-1 course an option?
You can join a Flight-1 course. You can't just sit in and audit one. But if you want to sign up and join a Flight-1 course, you're definitely welcome to do that. And, that could help you if you are going to be an AFF coach or are going to be something like that you want to give your students the best training possible.
Very good. George, our working behind the scenes, says this one might be one for Ron. So Ron, you may want a camera up there. Bill asked, is there a high number of incidents that happen when the weather changes or a jumper chooses to skydive in climate conditions? I assume they mean in conditions that are maybe not so conducive with skydiving. Weather changes or a jumper chooses to skydive in climate and I think she means in questionable climate, questionable atmospheric conditions. Is that, George, is that what you're asking about? She'll tag me back here in a minute. Ron,
yes, that's what I was asking about. Yeah, inclement conditions, bad weather.
Okay, thank you. You said it right. I read it wrong. And Ron, if you want to turn a camera on there, that's fine too. And guys, take it away.
So the incident reporting is just really starting to pick up, and tracking things like that hasn't really evolved to that point yet. I can say that there's been a number of incidents last year. We had over 300 last year reported, that there were a large number of ones that reported jumping in weather that they hadn't jumped in before. Guys, you've really got to take it slow when you're increasing your wind limits or jumping in different types of weather, because especially when you get a little bit higher wind limits or a little bit higher wind, it can greatly affect your pattern, the drive that your canopy has, the amount of turbulence, how severe the turbulence is. You got to take baby steps with that.
Very good. George, if you have any other questions for us, bring them in. Guys, everybody that's in the that's watching out there this evening, number one, because I want to make sure I don't forget this, because we'll be wrapping here in just a little bit. But I wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight. If we have more questions, we'll get to them here, but let me put a wrap on it anyway. Thanks for joining us tonight. You guys, you just can't imagine how special it is for us to be able to do what we're doing. For our membership. As the president of USPA, I take all this stuff very, very personally. I think most everybody knows that. To have the opportunity to sit and chat with Kaz tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are, it's a gold mine of information. Obviously, the point of the story is 0 fatalities. There's just no reason why we can't continue to chew away at that fatality number until we have a year where we literally have no fatalities. The number one thing that kills us is the inability to land parachutes safely for a variety of reasons. So I believe that's where we should be focusing a lot of our attention. You'll see in the future that USPA is stepping up our game. We also, all these folks that have Canopy training courses, all these people are stepping up the game. So I highly encourage everyone at any level to go take a Canopy course that is appropriate for your skill set and for your goals, whatever those may be, because there's a variety of ways that you can take training nowadays. It's not all just about learning to fly hot rod parachutes. It's about good Canopy flying skills and how to stay alive under Canopy. So take a Canopy course. Shannon, Ron, Jen, thank you guys so much. Oh, and George, of course, thank you guys so much for everything you guys did behind the scenes this evening. Albert Birchtold and his incredible team up there. And so with that said, back to Kaz. Do we have any more questions, or is that, hang on, let me find it, Kaz. You're so good at what you do that you've covered all the bases.
Not all of them in one night. There's so many bases to cover.
Richard, I happen to know, Richard has a question. I happen to personally know 2 people who are alive today, and I assure you that their doctors would tell you that they would not have been had they not mustered up the PLF of their life. Literally 2 guys in my life I know, both still jump today, fortunately. And so dovetailing with Richard's question, he wants you to highlight how important a proper PLF is. I'd love to hear this from you.
Yeah, you know, as we all know, and as you say, a PLF can really, really save you. You're much stronger when you're putting your feet together rather than just putting a limb out there and taking the brunt in, you know, with your whole body there. If you haven't practiced your PLFs for a while, you can just get up on a step and practice them, hopefully on grass or a pad or something. Be familiar with them. I know a lot of people that have broken their legs that could have probably saved themselves from breaking their legs from having from doing a proper PLF. Is something that we teach in AFF, but don't just leave it behind in AFF and think I'm done, one and done. Keep going out and, you know, practicing that. Doesn't matter if you look a bit silly sometimes, right? Just go have some fun. There's a lot of down days on the drop zone. And yeah, keep yourself a little safe.
You can have a good PLF can translate into a dramatically reduced hospital bill.
Absolutely.
So, you know what I mean? When you need one, you need one. And that's not the time to go, oh, wow, it's been 6 years since I did a PLF. If it has, still muster up the best one you got, but there's no need to catch yourself off guard like that. Practicing a PLF can absolutely save your life or save you from very serious injury. It can take a serious injury and turn it into a minor one. The same thing with going from it being fatal to being non-fatal. Good PLF has saved untold amounts of skydivers over the years. Let's see.
And that's just, you know, with that, it's just all about preparation, right? A lot of the things we went through tonight are, hey, if the more prepared, the more knowledge you have about something is the more awareness you're going to have. And with all of that ready to go, when you have to think really quickly, it's going to be ready. But if you haven't thought about something for a while, it mightn't be ready and you might not make that correct decision. So the more things you can have prepared and practiced and mechanically do it with your body, the safer it's going to be for everyone out there.
Yeah, you know, I've always said that to stay safe, basically in skydiving, you need 3 things. One of them is not age, by the way. I'm counting this anyway. You need the intellectual capability to learn the material, whatever that material is, whether it's a first jump course or whether it's your first time you're going to do crew or whatever it is. You need the ability to develop the skill to operate under highly stressful conditions, meaning the mechanical skill. And last but not least, the one we screw up most often is you need sound judgment. And if you have all 3 of those things and you put them together, you'll be prepared for pretty much anything that a skydive can hand you. But as we know, most often it's judgment that is the most often misused or not used. And so that's, in my world, that's how we stay safe, but it dovetails into everything you're talking about with Canopy stuff and the whole thing. So let me see if we have any other questions. Will you be teaching Flight-1 courses at the ranch this season?
I will. I haven't put any up yet, but I am definitely going to be doing some 101, 102 201 and 202 courses, and privates if they want.
Very good. Okay, so we've taken up enough of your time. I know you have a 10-year-old that you're still trying to be a mom for. Does he have the car keys yet?
Not yet. He does have his Nintendo Switch. That's his babysitter tonight. So,
Were you looking at him? Is it he's like watching mom do an interview?
he is. Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
for him. All right. Well, embarrass him every chance you get. That's part of
That's
your
all
job.
good.
All right. Parting words for us, Kaz?
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming. Just a few things maybe is like always think about keep learning, keep exploring things by, going to safety days, by listening to webinars. Definitely take a course. There's nothing that beats in-person instruction. Remember about your pattern, learn how to fly that predictable pattern, work on your accuracy on every jump. Always remember your landing priorities. And see if you can practice one thing under Canopy on each jump, and it's going to make you a way better Canopy pilot out there. And hopefully you all have a really safe 2023 and you have some amazing skydives. I can't wait. It's going to be about July because I had surgery until I get back into it, and I can't wait to get back into it. I love this sport. I love all the people in it, and stay safe, everyone out there.
Well, it certainly shows. Kaz Shiki, it's been so nice having you with us. Before we go, thanks so much to the headquarters staff, Albert Birchtold and his team, probably the most amazing group of people I've ever met in an administrative role anywhere. And I've traveled a little here and there. Ron Bell for your expertise tonight. Of course, Jen Sharp on IT, Shannon and George, you guys handle these things so incredibly well. Our PR and our social media folks, everybody, every step of the way. I love this organization. I love representing this organization. And I hope that our work is paying off. I know we're trying to keep everybody safe, and that's why we had Kaz here tonight. It just so happens it's also fun to have a conversation with her from that side of the house. So, Kaz, thank you so much. We appreciate having you.
Thanks so much, Chuck. You're amazing.
Oh, we try.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Everybody,
Cheers.
good night.
Good night, everyone.